My name is Brian Park, and I will be talking about Education for Leisure, written by Carol Ann Duffy for this practice individual oral commentary. Education for Leisure was written in the 1980s when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of Britain. Margaret Thatcher strongly believed in self-success and encouraged the individual pursuit of wealth. As a result, there were a lot of budget cuts, especially to education. This poem was inspired by Duffy's visits to underfunded schools, where she realized that a lot of the kids attending the schools would most likely end up unemployed. Duffy uses this poem to socially critique Thatcher's idea of self-success, using the speaker of the poem, who is an underprivileged teenager himself, as an example of the negative effects that can be caused from not helping the underprivileged. I will be looking at first the structure of the poem, and then the characterization, and then lastly the language of the poem in order to explore Duffy's opinion on Thatcher's idea for success. Firstly, I will be talking about the structure of the poem. The poem is a monologue of, as stated above, an underprivileged child who is on unemployment benefits. The poem is written in 5 free verses, with most lines consisting of very few words, and even has sentences that are only 1 word long, such as anything and Shakespeare, to further enhance the real-life and conversational nature of the poem. The short sentences could also portray the mental instability in the speaker, which is portrayed throughout the poem. However, because it is still a poem, Duffy keeps order in the 5 verses and has 4 lines to each stanza in order to keep the poetic nature. The poem follows a chronological order, with the first stanza describing the speaker's mindset and his reason for being in the mind state that he is in. The second stanza describes his experiences in school and how he did not understand anything, as he mentions that the speaker was in another language. The third stanza portrays the speaker's egotistical and narcissistic view, as he considers himself a genius. This stanza is also the first, which portrays another life form showing fear of the speaker. Although he had killed a fly in the previous stanza, the fly didn't fly away in fear as the speaker approached it and just died under his thumb. The fact that the cat runs away from the speaker shows a progression in hostility in the speaker. In the fourth stanza, the hostility increases and he moves on to killing bigger life forms such as his goldfish. And finally, in the last stanza, which ends with "I touch your arm," there is a sudden change from a non-personal to a personal problem, as Duffy is showing through the last sentence that the underprivileged kids aren't the only ones who are affected by the budget cuts, but rather society as a whole. Secondly, I will be talking about the characterization of the speaker. The first line of the poem sets a dark mood as the speaker declares that he is going to kill something that day. The next sentence, consisting of only 1 word, which is anything, shows the speaker's intense desire to inflict pain on something, as he doesn't care what he hurts as long as it is capable of feeling pain. The speaker also says that he would play God, showing that he has a desire for power and recognition. The reasons as to why the speaker wants to inflict pain and wants recognition is abundant in the stanza as well. He mentions that he has had enough of being ignored, where the speaker seems to feel as if the only way to be noticed by others is by psychotic means. As the poem progresses and the speaker gets ignored again and again, he moves on to more drastic measures to satisfy his need of getting recognized. For example, the first day he decided that he had been ignored too much, and therefore he killed a fly. After he killed the fly, he compared the dead fly to his inability to understand Shakespeare, as can be seen when he describes the fly to be in another language. However, the reader seems to have to reassure himself that he isn't stupid for not understanding Shakespeare, as he says, "I'm a genius" in the next stanza. In order to get the idea that he is insignificant out of his head, he turns to the cat, which runs away at the sight of him. This seems to bring the speaker a lot of pleasure and describes the cat's actions as a recognition of his ingenuousness. However, Judging from the fact that the cat ran away and hid itself shows that the speaker's need for the feeling of power has happened on previous occasions and that the cat had been a subject of abuse in the past. However, because the people don't appreciate his autograph and the man he talks to on the radio doesn't recognize him as a superstar, the speaker seems to have a need to inflict more pain and ultimately moves on from animals to humans. Although Duffy does portray the speaker in a negative and violent light, she also gives hints that the state that the speaker is in is not entirely his fault. Judging from the fact that he has been ignored so much in his life, to the extent where he wants to play God, the speaker seems to have had the love of parents absent in his life. The speaker is also portrayed in a sympathetic light because the speaker himself believes that he is capable of a lot of things, as can be seen when he says that he breathes out talent on the glass. However, no one seems to recognize this about him, as is portrayed when he says, "I could be anything all with half the chance." This has led him to become destructive at first and then self-destructive. Lastly, I will be talking about the language that is used in the poem. Similar to the structure of the poem, in order to enhance the conversational aspect of this poem, Duffy uses a lot of colloquial speech in the poem. In the rare instances where the speaker doesn't use colloquial speech are when they are intertextual references. The first reference is to King Lear by Shakespeare when the speaker is reminded by the play that he studied at school when he kills the fly against the window. The quote is, "As flies to wanton boys are we to the gods," which is a very dark quote that portrays how insignificant boys are to God. This also portrays the reason why the speaker wants to be God is because God has so much power compared to the people. The second intertextual reference is in line 14 in the fourth stanza, where the speaker says, "I see that it is good." This is a reference to Genesis. After God created life, he says, "I see that is good." This is very ironic in the way where they are used in completely different ways. God says that "I see that it is good" after creating life, while the speaker says "I see that it is good" while killing